Hello and welcome back. As you can see from my channel uploads, I've not prepared a what's new video for Raptor Lake overclocking. And there's a couple of reasons for that, which I will detail in this video. I will also cover some of my initial Raptor Lake overclocking results and initial guidance for what will be important for Raptor Lake overclocking. And then I'll also give you a little bit of details on what are my video plans for Raptor Lake and beyond. So what's up with not having this what's new video for Raptor Lake overclocking? Well, it's pretty simple really. I didn't find the time. I run this channel in my spare time and turns out that August to October was extremely busy both in my professional and my personal life. As you know, I live in Taiwan. Unfortunately, the country has been closed off for travel for the past couple of years. Until recently, even residents had to go through a mandatory 14-day hotel quarantine upon returning to the island. So obviously, I had to stay put for a while and not travel. Recently, however, the country has started to open up again, and the mandatory hotel quarantine rule was lifted. So I decided to travel back to Europe and visit family and friends for the first time in 3 years. It was a great trip, but obviously it kept me away from all the hardware here in Taiwan. So between the middle of September and the middle of October, there was simply no opportunity for me to prepare for Raptor Lake. My original plan was to include all my testing before my travels. So that includes AM5 Raphael, Raptor Lake, as well as the Intel Arc A380. Obviously, it didn't really work out like that. And that's not just because Raphael took up a lot of time in August. It's also because at that time, the Raptor Lake platform wasn't really quite ready for daily overclocking strategies. So instead, when I returned back to Taiwan, I gathered the hardware needed to do my overclocking guides on Monday and Tuesday this week. Obviously, a little late to do a comprehensive overview on Raptor Lake overclocking. So what do I have in the planning? Well, essentially, I intend to cover everything as I usually do. So that includes this 3900K with the Apex motherboard and a cryo cooler. There you go, the Delta Tech cryo cooler. Also this 13600K with a DDR4 Z790 motherboard and just a regular Velocity 2 water block. This one here. Ooh, there we go. And also a 13900K with this Aorus Z790 Master, also with the EK Velocity 2. And then I have also the 13700K with the Z690 Torpedo EKX. And I might also have a look at the UHD Graphics 770. For each platform, I will of course have a comprehensive SkatterBencher overclocking guide, as well as the traditional 5-minute OC video. As you can see, I'm trying to cover as many angles of Raptor Lake overclocking as possible. That includes 3 different motherboard brands, both Z790 and Z690 chipsets, one setup that uses DDR4 memory, and one platform that will leverage Intel cryo cooling technology. The UHD Graphics 770 video is still a question mark, as the integrated graphics overclocking videos are not particularly popular. I've already covered overclocking this specific IGP with the Alder Lake 12900K. However, if the overclocking headroom or overclocking experience substantially differs from Alder Lake, I may still dig into it. You know, as the channel description states, a SkatterBencher is enticed to overclock every piece of hardware that passes through their hands. The overclocking strategies for Raptor Lake will be remarkably similar to Alder Lake because the overclocking toolset hasn't really changed. So the ultimate overclocking strategy will involve using tools like adjusting turbo ratios based on the active core count, per core ratio limits, advanced voltage frequency point tuning, and overclocking thermal velocity boost. And for those who want lower maximum temperatures, of course, using the TJ Max offset. I covered most of these overclocking technologies in my Alder Lake launch video, so check that one out if you need more information. If you've been following the internet rumors and gossip about Raptor Lake in the past couple of months, it should come as no surprise that this is an overclocking beast with a lot of performance left in the tank if you're willing to go search for it. Raptor Lake has already broken the 10-year-old overall CPU frequency world record previously held by AMD Bulldozer, and I have no doubt that we'll see a lot of Intel 13th generation liquid nitrogen cooled at the top of the benchmark leaderboards. But also for regular Joes like you and I with regular water cooling, there's a lot of overclocking joy to be had. From the looks of it, you'll be able to see 6 GHz and beyond in actual workloads. That's not to say in all core workloads and not to say in the really heavy workloads, but light workloads, yeah, you'll see 6 GHz Raptor Lake with regular water cooling. I have one system up and running with the Core i7-13700K and the Z690 Torpedo EKX. At default, the CPU will boost up to 5.4 GHz for 2 P-cores and up to 4.2 GHz for each E-core. The package power is limited to 253 watts. In an all-core Prime 95 workload, that translates into a P-core frequency of 5.2 GHz and an E-core frequency of 4.2 GHz at 1.27 volt. Surprisingly, the CPU package temperature is only 85 degrees Celsius under regular water cooling. The default VF curve for this 13700K is shown in this graph. As you can see, this 13700K can reach a 5.4 GHz boost with only 1.32 volt. In my initial overclocking results, I can quickly get the CPU up to 5.9 GHz for each CPU core and up to 5.8 GHz when all cores are active, though obviously these frequencies are only attainable in light workloads. I need about 1.4 volt for 5.9 GHz, which is only a 100 millivolt voltage increase over stock for a 500 MHz frequency increase. Not too shabby. By setting an adaptive voltage of 1.4 volt in the BIOS, we map it to the 59x ratio. So all ratios between 54x and 59x will have higher voltages. In terms of performance, I get about plus 12% across the 3DMark CPU profile test suite, plus 15% in Geekbench, and plus 19% in AI Benchmark. In an all-core Prime 95 workload, that translates into a P-core frequency of 5.3 GHz and an E-core frequency of 4.3 GHz at 1.34 volt. As I already pointed out, you'll need to rely on the Intel Overclocking toolkit for the more advanced manual tuning. I just started manually tuning this chip, and I've already got every P-core running at 6 GHz with a couple even at 6.1 GHz using slightly less than 1.5 volt. Also, in an all-core Prime 95 non-AVX workload, the P-cores run at 5.6 GHz with about 1.28 volt. While the CPU package power hits 350 watt, the CPU temperature doesn't even immediately shoot up to the TJ max of 100 degrees Celsius. Here are a couple of tips and tricks to maximize your Raptor Lake overclock. First, tune the turbo ratio for active P-core counts. This allows you to set a high and aggressive overclock when a few cores are active without jeopardizing the all-core stability. Secondly, use the core ratio limit to prevent the weak P-cores from trying to run at the highest ratios. You can do the same for the E-cores, but remember that the E-cores are controlled in groups of 4 cores. Thirdly, you can use the advanced VF point offset to under and overvolt specific points on the VF curve. You'll need a very thorough understanding of how adaptive voltage works on Intel platforms to extract the most out of your CPU. I did a lengthy explanation of this process in SkatterBencher number 34 with this exact Z690 Torpedo EKX motherboard. As a quick side note, the VF points available for Raptor Lake appear to be better than Alder Lake. On this 13700K, there are VF points for 54x, 53x, 52x, and 51x. That means it should be a lot easier to fine-tune for the best all-core performance. Lastly, you can rely on overclocking thermal velocity boost to squeeze the last bit of frequency out of your CPU. I also explained how that works in SkatterBencher number 34, but I haven't gotten around trying it out on this particular system. In my current schedule, I have the first Raptor Lake overclocking guides pegged for about mid-November, and I hope that's enough time to figure out all of the ins and outs of Raptor Lake overclocking. And then I think by the end of the year, I should have the entire Raptor Lake overclocking guide catalog finished, wrapped up. That is, of course, assuming there are no special overclocking situations like the non-K overclocking as with Alder Lake. Beyond Raptor Lake, there's still more to come. As you have seen from my YouTube channel, SkatterBencher number 44 is missing, and that's the one that is reserved for the A380 graphics card. If you want to know what's the holdup on that one, I suggest you check out the update video I published on the channel a while back. By the way, I also purchased the full cover water block from Bixby for this graphics card, and I'm kind of eager to find out how well it will be able to cool the VRM under an overclocked workload. On the CPU side, I expect that by year's end, I will have begun preparations for upcoming AMD and Intel CPUs. That may or may not include the rumored AMD Ryzen 7000 X3D variants, an AMD Ryzen Threadripper Pro with Zen 4, and perhaps even Intel Sapphire Rapids. It's a bit more unclear on the GPU side, as that's not really my forte. But here's my current thinking. For AMD desktop graphics, I may have a look at the Radeon 7000 series, but only if they're reasonably priced and I can actually get my hands on a card, and if they're less constrained than the Radeon 6000 series. While I enjoyed overclocking the Radeon RX 6500 XT, the artificially imposed overclocking constraints ultimately make AMD GPU overclocking a very unappealing proposition. For Intel desktop graphics, there is of course the ARC 700 series with the A750 and A770. Normally I would skip those since I already looked at the ARC A380, but I might reconsider if the overclocking challenges have been resolved. As for NVIDIA desktop graphics, I've yet to overclock an Ampere GPU, so the RTX 3050 is pretty high on my list of projects. With the GPU prices coming down, it might actually be reasonable to get around it sometime soon. On the contrary, the RTX 40 series are not high on my priority list, as I have no intention of buying an RTX 4090 just for overclocking. So I'll wait for the more affordable RTX 40 SKUs to become available in the coming quarters. I've also always been interested in trying to figure out what is the performance headroom in the mobile CPUs and GPUs. But I hope you understand that I'm not particularly keen on spending a lot of money on laptops where I will inevitably void the warranty. So I'll just keep an eye out, see if there's any opportunity, and that's it. Anyway, if you have any suggestions or ideas, feel free to share them with me in the comment section below. And that's it for this video. If you're purchasing a Raptor Lake CPU, I wish you a lot of pleasure with your overclocking journey, and see you next time.